This is Mr. Christopher with Funkatopia, and I have the honor of speaking with Mr. Jack Hues, lead singer of Wang Chung, and also his new project, Jack Hues and the Quartet. How are you, sir?
I'm very good, thanks, Chris.
Fantastic. It's good that you're still around, still putting out great music. Yes, it's obviously so. I mean, kind of talk a little bit. I obviously primarily want to speak about the new project, but I do want to kind of cover a little bit about what it's like for you now, having been one of the prolific bands of the '80s, and when you see some of these artists like David Bowie and Prince that are passing away, how does that affect you emotionally and just in retrospective?
Yeah. I mean, David Bowie's passing affected me a lot, actually, because he was very important to me. I think when Nick and I first were working together, his albums, particularly Low, Heroes, Station to Station, that sort of clutch of albums,
yes,
were big influences on early Wang Chung. And certainly his singing was a huge influence for me. And his whole approach, really, of seeing pop music as essentially a viable artistic form, if you know what I mean, and bringing in other bits of art, Andy Warhol or literature, the way he sort of mixed things together was very inspiring. And Prince, similarly, actually. I did get to meet him one time, actually, in Minneapolis. It was just when he was releasing Purple Rain. And
wow.
We were invited to his club, and he did a gig there, which was basically premiering that album. And that was unbelievable, really amazing. And we were introduced to each other. We didn't really say much, as I think he was a man of few words. I probably was then as well. So, but no, that was a really impressive thing. But as to how that affects me now, I think it affects me in the sense that I want to do as much as I can while I can. This Jack Hues and the Quartet project is really part of that. We released a Wang Chung album a couple of years ago called Taser Up, and sort of
yes.
But I'm writing all the time, and this project has been something that I've been doing for the last sort of 10 years, really. And it's really about working with jazz musicians, all of whom are good and younger than I am. So that sort of keeps me fresh, keeps me musically challenged, and keeps me moving forward. And I think that's the important thing to be feeling as an artist, whatever age you are, particularly when you're my age.
Understandably. So tell me a little bit about Jack Hues and the Quartet. Exactly, who's all in the band? How did this band come together? Tell me about some of your live performances. I know that I'd seen that it was indicated that you did some performances in the sorely missed, and I put the quotes up, Orange Street Music Club in Canterbury. So tell me a little bit about that club, because I'm not familiar with that club. But but first, let's start as to how the band actually got together and what the process was there.
Well, I moved to Canterbury about 16 years ago, and at the time my daughter was still at school and having piano lessons. Her piano teacher was this young guy, Sam. When Violet went off to university, I said to him, well, we should keep in touch, and come round and play and stuff. So a couple of evenings he came round with just some jazz tunes, some Thelonious Monk tunes, actually. And he'd play piano, I'd play guitar, and we just sort of amused ourselves, drank a bit of wine, and played some tunes. And I started thinking, this is really cool, actually. And then we found a bass player, upright bass player, and I started to write stuff myself, partly because I'm not really a jazz musician, and I found the charts really hard to get my head around. But also, it's just me. I think it's always about writing. And as I started to get these new influences of Thelonious Monk, Miles Davis, Charlie Mingus, and so on, I just started coming up with all this stuff. So we then started doing gigs, and of course, Canterbury is an interesting city. Not that there's much of a city, but historically, there are all these bands that are associated with what is now called the Canterbury Scene, the Canterbury Sound, and this is back in the 70s. So we're talking bands like Soft Machine, Caravan, Egg, Hatfield on the North, bands that may or may not be familiar to listeners.
Right, no, yeah.
But what they have in common is a sort of the strange mix of sort of rock, jazz, sort of proggy sense of rock, and it's quite a lot of instrumental music, and I started to get really inspired by that as well. And so the quartet is really ideally served by Canterbury and this audience that sort of grows up of people who really come and listen. They're really into listening. And Orchestra Music Club was set up around the time that I moved here by this guy. And it was an old dancing school ballroom, and we used to play there fairly regularly, and we sort of got an audience together, and it became a real little scene for a while. It has now turned into a sort of more generic kind of cocktail bar, unfortunately. But it's still cool. But we don't play there anymore. And but no, there was I felt a real connection with those old Canterbury bands and what we were doing, and we're also connected with a band called Sid Arthur. I don't know whether you've come across
They're
them.
from Canterbury also.
Yeah, they're from Canterbury, and they are about to release a new album on Universal. They've been recorded that in Los Angeles. So, around this time, I also did a bit of teaching at the university. I used to teach songwriting, but I had to stop doing that.
Oh, really?
But the couple of the guys in Siddhartha were pupils of mine, and so it's a really interesting little scene, and there is that sense of, like, kind of, for me at least, giving back to younger guys, guys who are coming up, and that's something that's lacking a bit in normal pop music, I think. In jazz you get it all the time, the older guys play with younger guys, and there's a much more sort of flow of exchange of information. Pop bands, for whatever reason, don't seem to do that sort of thing.
That was one thing that Prince seemed to specialize in with, when he would bring in people like Miles Davis to play with his project, or bring in Maceo Parker, or just have all these different, older musicians that could actually bring an extra flavor and more, and make it more of a historic thing. But you're right, it's not done like that. And you did mention something that was interesting to me, because from in the States, I was lucky enough to see Prince's last two shows here in Atlanta. And, I was trying to enjoy the first of the two shows, and there was just, everybody was screaming, and there was a lot of screaming behind me and beside me, and it was making it very, very difficult to really focus on what the performer was doing, what he was doing. And you had mentioned that, I guess, in that particular region, they actually sit and really kind of absorb what's happening. Is that something that you've seen when the band tours, that you see like a really distinct difference between the audiences between, say, in the United States as opposed to across the pond?
Yeah, I mean, are you talking about with Wang Chung now, sort of thing?
Oh, well, yeah, basically. I mean, any of your experiences.
I mean, back in the 80s, I guess Wang Chung had its fair share of hysteria. But
congratulations, by the way.
When you go and see a rock band, I think people go there and they talk and they drink, and the music's very loud, so you can talk. It doesn't really matter, sort of thing. But when you hear the quartet, we play, not acoustically exactly, but it's not much louder than acoustics, sort of thing. So you can't. They're small venues, so you have to listen. If you're talking, you're as loud as the band. Really. So it's a different mentality in a way, a different approach.
Right. So the new album from Jack Hues and the Quartet is called.
It's called A Thesis on the Ballad.
It's on the ballad. Now, this was, from what I understand, your pianist Sam had a dream about performing an album along with the poetry works of Calvin Corcoran. Am I pronouncing that correct? Okay. So what is, can you kind of give me a little bit of an idea as to, were you familiar with his works before Sam had presented it to you?
Sam is a force here in Canterbury, and about 2-3 years ago he set up this, because he despaired of being able to sort of have anywhere to play in Canterbury, he set up his own sort of range of gigs, a set of gigs called Free Range. So I think it's every Thursday night in Canterbury there's a free gig in a venue, it's usually a little sort of cafe or whatever. And sometimes he has like really amazing people. He has Evan Parker, who's a local guy, who's like an avant-garde saxophone player. He's had various young jazz players play at the club, like real world-class people. He'll have people like just showing a movie and reciting poetry, or people like ringing handbells, or all kinds of pretty out there stuff. Or never been with sort of just a straight ahead pop band playing Coldplay covers or something. So it was always something interesting. So one night a month, Sam would invite poetry to the club. So it was effectively taken over by the creative writing department. And Kelvin came and read one time, and I loved his poetry. I thought it was a real cut above. And he's got this wonderful way of expressing himself. I mean, it's poetry, but it also feels like common language as well, if you know what I mean. And he has a very kind of sharp sense of things. And Sam, basically said we should do something with Kelvin. And then he phoned me up one day and said he'd had this dream where it was a church. Kelvin stood up and read a poem, and then a musician came out of one of the sort of niches of the church and played a song based on the poem. And then Kelvin read another poem, and the same thing happened. He said, I think we could make that happen. So I thought, yeah. So Kelvin sent me a book of poetry, which lay on my piano for 2 or 3 weeks. And I tried various things, but nothing was really much coming through. And then one Saturday afternoon, I sat down and it sort of fell open at this set of poems. It was 6 poems collectively called a thesis on the band. And I read the first poem and immediately I could hear the music. It was the weirdest feeling. And normally I would just write a song and sort of sketch it out and then go out and do other stuff. But when I finished that song, I immediately looked at the next poem and could hear the music to that as well. And so I just sat there for 2 hours and wrote all 6 of the songs. Really. So it came to me very sort of naturally, intuitively, and when I played the stuff to Sam and to Kelvin, they were really into it. So we gigged those songs a few times, and it's really just written for me, Sam on piano. I sing, and I play electric and acoustic guitar, and then there's an upright bass player as well. One track has drums in it, but really it's a sort of trio of people. So Jack Hues and the trio. Right. So so that's how that project came about.
So how involved was Kelvin in the process of actually recording it at that point? Did you say, here's the music, this is what we have? I mean, what was his reaction, or was he involved in the process?
Was very strong. I've worked with a couple of other poets on another piece that we're going to release later on in the year. And I think, guys who, sounds a bit patronising to say, guys who read poetry, they're used to reading to very small audiences, little upstairs pubs in London and stuff. And I think the idea of working with musicians and all the sort of frisson that goes on with that is thrilling for these guys, So they're really into it. And I think Kelvin was genuinely sort of moved actually by the way his poems get sort of amplified in a way by the music.
Right. So tell me exactly how this album fits in with. I understand that there's a volume 1 that I guess focuses on some other poets, and a volume 3 that actually features the band that you're talking about, Sid Arthur. Where does this particular piece fit into where these volumes and how they're going to be released to the public?
Yeah, this is actually volume 3, in the sense that it's the last piece that I wrote.
Okay, so it's kind of like a Star Wars thing.
Piece that we've recorded. And in a way, I think it's the most accessible of the 3 pieces.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm sort of like getting into doing a bit of publicity around this is that I think there is a connection between what I'm doing with these songs and my work with Wang Chung. And I think the Wang Chung audience and maybe a wider audience would be interested in this project. It is a little niche, but I think from the sort of point of view of the evolution of my writing, and maybe a sort of evolutionary sense of what a pop song is now, they're in quite an interesting place.
Right, because I actually reviewed some of this. There's 6 songs in this album, and I reviewed them all. And if you would entertain me for a minute, I'd like to kind of talk about each one of them, if you have a few moments. The album starts out with a song called Barbara Allen, and your delivery on that song is very passionate, very theatric. Did you feel connected? It's got some really distinctive jazzy chord changes, but did you feel connected with this particular character, or did you feel like you've had a Barbara Allen in your life at some point in time? Because you really delivered.
Yeah, in some ways, you know. I mean, I think everybody has a Barbara Allen in their life at some time.
Right, yeah.
And yeah, I think I was just struck by it's a sort of an archetypal thing. I mean, there's also an Irish folk song called Barbara Allen, which I didn't know. But it sort of, what interested me about the Thesis songs is that they had this resonance with, it was like old English, Irish, Scottish folk ballads.
Uh-huh.
There was just something about the way that it sort of talks about her killer beauty and this sort of image of this sort of really sort of femme fatale, I suppose, and but in a very kind of folk ballad kind of way. And yeah, like the music just sort of came to me. When I look back at the music, I realised at the beginning of it, it's very like the Beatles' "I Am the Walrus." Actually, it's the same sort of melody, you know. And I think there was something about the way Kelvin was writing and the way I was responding musically that was pitching me back into my early influences. You know. And I think I'm always about the music really, rather than the lyrics per se. You know. So the lyrics trigger musical reactions in me.
Right, because one thing I was going to ask about this, because you are dealing with poetry, and there's not a whole bunch of rhythmic patterns or rhyming lines that are happening. So does that kind of affect your style of writing when you're responding musically, like that? Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like the opposite of your pop sensibilities. It's
yeah.
So
it kind of is. I mean, one of the things I liked working with these poems was that I had to sort of impose a form on them, because then they're written as like usually 3 verses of completely separate text. But in certain songs, I'll single out a couple of lines to create a chorus, or I'll repeat a verse to make it like a more sort of verse, chorus type thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to sort of find the form in the songs, and sometimes it would mean sort of splitting up lines and stuff like that. But that was one of the things I really enjoyed about writing these songs, and that came to me quite naturally, to find the song form and then rebuild the poetry within that form.
Right. So the second song on there is obviously, because each song as it progresses through the album kind of, definitely takes on a whole different persona. The next song was "Expansive Water," which is more like it's kind of got this bluegrass, swampy acoustic guitar, these really spacious piano parts. It was more about ambiance more than it was really the structure of the song. Explain a little bit how "Expansive Water" kind of came together.
Yeah. Well, like I say, I finished Barbara Allen, so this thought, okay, it's great. I've written a song. I started on this project.
Right.
And as I sort of got up to go shopping or whatever I was going to do you know what I mean? I started to hear this, da, 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 da. It just sort of like how that line, the water is wide, I can't get over. And then I sort of played it on guitar, and it was like, and then I heard this sort of rocky, bluesy thing. I think I really love with albums to sort of hop from genre to genre within an album.
Yeah.
Beatles always did that. Wang Chung has always done that.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of, like, with Barbara Allen, it's a sort of medium tempo, sort of bluesy thing, I suppose, jazzy thing. The sense of Expansive Water being more of a sort of linear rock song, if you like,
right.
Really kind of appealed to. And yeah, again, musically, I just got the flavour of how that song worked musically. And it's very simple, the melody's got very few notes in it.
Right.
And the chords are simple. And it just sort of kind of came out, popped out very quickly.
The next song, obviously, the Truth was obviously one of the more interesting ones on the album, because it seems like there's 3 minutes plus of this new age feel type of build up. That song obviously is probably the most interesting out of all of them, because there was a point in time where I listened to a lot of those. I don't know what they're really referred to. They're kind of like the subliminal type of music that you have going in the background that have like the standard chords that go through the whole entire song. So explain how The Truth is coming together as far as
well, I guess The Truth is a sort of an atmosphere, really. rather than a song, as you rightly say. And it's really a set of instructions. And one of the things that Sam was experimenting at the time was using EBOs, which are these things that you use on a guitar usually.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a little magnetic field that's generated out of this thing that rests on the string. So it makes the string vibrate as a sustained tone. And Sam got hold of 4 or 5 of these EBOs and would just place them on the piano strings. And that's what creates these really interesting chords and textures.
Nice.
And so I sort of, when I'm working with Sam and Loran and Mark, actually, it's quite interesting because, in a rock band, you work with the musicians and they're kind of like, tell me what to do and I'll do it. So you say, okay, you play this, it changes to F here, at this we go to the chorus, and it's very routined and you kind of do it the same every time.
Right.
Working with Sam and the other guys in the quartet, if you start telling them what to do, they get really pissed off.
Right.
So they kind of like, I just want to play, I just want to do this and do that. So what I find really fun working with them is that you have to sort of give them a degree of latitude to keep them interested. And the truth is really kind of, okay, guys, with this, just build up a chordal texture. At some point when it gets to a level, I'm going to speak these lines, and on the very last word, Loran, I want you to hit that low E as loud as you can, and then just fade it out. And that's the song. There's no notes or anything. But at various points in these songs, like in an Expansive Water, it sort of goes completely off into this very watery, improvisatory thing for a while. And again, that keeps Sam interested. So it's the mix of improvisation and written out stuff is one of the things that I really enjoy with the quartet. And that makes the gigs very unpredictable as well, because
right.
different each time.
Right, yeah, it's not structured exactly the same, so you kind of have a little bit of leeway to kind of go wherever you'd like to go.
Exactly.
Now, Psychopaths, which is, we're already past halfway mark here. Psychopaths is, you would think that the song would be the most adventurous just based on the title, but it is actually the least psychopathic song on the album.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
right, exactly. So, it kind of explained the meaning behind the Psychopaths as far as, lyrically.
Well, I guess that one, this game, it sort of came to me, the music came to me very quickly, and it just sort of came out in this sort of like very classic, I suppose in a way, a thesis on the ballad, you play that song, you get, I get what this is about. This is sort of like English sort of folk music, like coming out of Airport Convention or something like that.
Right.
And I think for me, one of my big obsessions is Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
It has a bit of Bob Dylanism in the way I deliver it vocally, and I've never ever been able to approach that before in the sort of formats that I've worked in. And the quite why it's the more conventional of all the songs, I'm not too sure. Maybe it is a reaction to that title, to contain it in a more sort of viable format.
Yeah, it's definitely it was a surprising song just for that very that very distinctive quality of it. Class War and Sex War, which is the next to the last song of it. Very articulately structured song. Again, back to that unexpected chord changes and not really the listener not really knowing where the song's going. But a powerful message in the background. What was your take on that one? I felt like you could have gone a lot of directions with that.
Yeah. I guess of the 6 songs, that's the one that I sort of sketched out. I just knew it had to have those piano arpeggios, and then it would sort of go off and do something more like guitar in the middle, and then be sort of rocky at the end. But then I sort of filled out the music a bit later. So those piano arpeggios are actually pretty complicated, the chord structures that they contain. And it's an interesting lyric. I can't really say what it was articulately that appealed to me about it, but I think when it gets to the middle bit, to the roots of narrative in Rock, Ice and Fire, there's something about Kelvin writing there about the sort of roots of poetry and storytelling and all that stuff, and I think the music kind of settles there with that in quite a different kind of way.
Right.
So,
And then the closing song "And So" obviously is primarily piano and really moody retrospective vocals. Kind of let me know. Explain how you felt like that was probably the best closing song. Does it kind of like tie everything up tidy with a bow?
For me, it sort of does, musically certainly.
Right.
It's especially after Class 4 and Sex War, which is musically quite complicated. And so is very simple, just like chords 1, 4, or 5.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I never wrote like that in Wang Chung. I was always twisting and turning and trying to find new little sort of different things. And with this, I felt like I could really just relax with it and just sing the song in a very classic ballad-like way. I wanted it to sound like it was written sort of 500 years ago, sort of thing.
Right.
And for me, there's a level of simplicity that I think really speaks to the audience. Actually, when we play it live, especially when you've been through the journey of the other 5 songs, that song has a stillness about it that I think really gets to people.
Yeah. Well, I first off, I want to tell you that it is an honor to actually get to speak with you. And thank you for taking so much time out of your schedule to kind of go through the album and kind of discuss a lot of the different songs that are here. What would you like the audience to know in closing about this album and what they can expect when they pick up a copy?
Yeah, well, I think I recorded it here in my house in Canterbury, and it's pretty much live takes. I did overdub the vocals on it because I always feel the vocals can be better, and I just like to sort of mix the sort of jazz aesthetic, if you like,
mm-hmm.
which is very much about capturing performance, and if there are mistakes, there are mistakes, and that's it, sort of thing. And the pop aesthetic, which is like you can make the perfect record, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And mixing those two things, I think, is always interesting. Sometimes not so successful, but on this recording, I think it really works well. So when people buy it, I think if you can hear a connection with Wang Chung, great. If you can't, that's great too. I think if you want some writing that's really coming from a kind of, like a lifetime spent with songwriting, then I think this is some of my best work. And I think it's very sort of, I hate saying it's honest, because I think everything I've done is honest, but it is, acoustic instruments. There's no electronics on it really, apart from the electric guitar with
right.
delay. So it's sort of real instruments, real singing, and sort of good craftsmanship. I think so.
Yes, I absolutely would have to agree. I think the way that it's crafted and the way that the songs are structured, there's a lot of surprises. There's a lot of peaks and valleys and different. It's more of creating an experience, so that you're kind of along for a journey. So yeah, I would definitely suggest anybody that even if you're a Wang Chung fan, more removed from the pop hits of Wang Chung, more like the deeper part of the catalogs, kind of along the lines of the feeling that you were kind of getting on Taser Up, that kind of moody, atmospheric type of songwriting. It's a great album. I really enjoyed listening to it, and I definitely suggest that you pick it up. We actually will be playing a little bit of clips. We're not hearing it here in the interviews, but I'll be playing little clips in the background as you're talking about some of the songs, so people can kind of get a feel for things. But I greatly appreciate you spending some time with us, and thank you very much, Mr. Hues, and have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time as well. I really appreciate it. It's great talking to you.
All day long.